Well, my children, would you wish me to ramble, or would you wish me to speak upon some point? Since this is by way of being a regular meeting, I must ask you if you have anything to put to me. There is nothing that I would speak about particularly, and if you have questions, the probability is that I shall be able to stay a little longer than if you have no questions, for it is possible that you may realize that when we, any of us, making a contact such as this, it is a little difficult to retain clarity of mind and therefore clarity of speech, because it is a remote control that is going on at the present moment, you see. The mind, which is Abu, or which belongs to Abu, is not here situate in this body, nor even closely linked with this body, as is the mind of the instrument himself when he shall be making use of his own physical vessel. The mind which is Abu remains, in terms of vibration, necessarily a little remote, but with a strong link, a powerful link, with the subconscious or greater spirit mind of the instrument. And that has the linkage with the physical body, and it is through that indirect means that I am enabled to operate. But if I shall be called upon or required to speak extempore, then necessarily I must reflect, and I must endeavor to find and to choose my phrases, and to trust that my mind can pass them through this other mind, and that this other mind can persuade this body to respond in the manner in which I desire that it shall. And you will see that the process is somewhat laborious.
Yes, exactly.
But if you ask a question, then you have triggered off the answer. For although the question comes to me indirectly through your own speech and through the organs of hearing of this body and the subconscious mind of this body, nonetheless you are at one and the same time directly in contact with me as far as the subconscious aspect is concerned. And it is from that side that I receive more fruitfully your question than I do from the actual speech which you must make use of.
Yes.
That is why, upon occasion, one of my children may perhaps have put a question to me, and I have found it necessary to rephrase that question. You will have remarked this perhaps.
Yes.
And my child, my son or my sister, will then have said, yes, Abu, that is just how I would have wished to put the question. But that is just how my child had put the question, subconsciously.
Yeah.
It was the words that were at fault. Thank you, my dear sisters. Then perhaps I may hear from you.
Well, Abu, your present instrument and I were talking the other day about what happens to him and to others when he is being your instrument and his spirit is withdrawn. Where it goes, you've probably asked this before, but I haven't heard it. And the difference between the various degrees of unconsciousness, trance, anaesthesia, sleep, and the sort of half sleep and half waking condition that one's in sometimes. You're not really here, and you're not really withdrawn. And we were wondering what happened to the mind of the person and the spirit.
Thank you, my sister. It is a somewhat involved question, as you will appreciate, but it is not as complex and difficult as it may appear. for all these conditions to which you have referred, including the one where you say you are half here, you are not really here, and yet you are not really away. It is called, on occasion, a brown study, perhaps.
Yes.
All these circumstances and conditions, then, are merely degrees of the one withdrawal. For there is but one complete and absolute withdrawal, and that is the state which you call death. The spirit is then completely withdrawn and cut off from
Yes.
the physical, you understand?
Yes.
But, and this is more important, far more important, well, not perhaps usually recognized and realized in relation to the other states of which you speak. Not only in the state of death, not only is the spirit completely cut off from the physical body, but it is completely awake in the spirit planes, completely awake and aware.
Yes.
And between complete wakefulness in the physical, wakefulness to this 3 or 4 dimensional world of yours, I do not know what your scientists have arrived at to call it just now, your 3-dimensional space-time continuum, a very difficult one indeed, and it has little meaning for me. From full wakefulness then in that particular universe to full wakefulness in our universe, those are the two poles, the opposite poles. And there is an infinity of gradation between them. And the lack of concentration, the absence of awareness, the partial absence of awareness of the physical world will correspond with an equally partial awareness of the spirit world, the psychic, or the astral plane, some part, at all events, of the non-physical world. But it is not possible to say that in such and such a condition the spirit has gone so and so far away, for such terms would not apply. You see, your mind does not go away when you go to sleep. It merely functions in a different set of vibratory circumstances, in a different universe, to use a word. And in deep trance the same thing applies. Deep sleep and deep trance would be parallel conditions, and the awareness in trance would be similar to the awareness in sleep. And if a trance medium, an instrument such as this, is in the habit of recalling sufficient of his experiences during sleep to recall and to bring back memory in the form of dream, then he will, or she will, quite certainly have recollection of what has been going on, something of what has been going on, whilst he or she is in deep trance. If there is no strong tendency to dream, then there will be no strong tendency to bring back recollection from a trance state. That, I think, is
Yes, that's
an indication of the parallelism of those two conditions.
yes.
And you can parallel the other conditions almost equally. A light trance, where the physical body is still quite closely in contact, in touch with the etheric, and therefore with the spirit mind, the subconscious mind, so that, for example, a noise, a touching, would recall the medium, the instrument, directly. That will correspond to a light sleep, and so on. The condition of clairvoyance, where the medium is intentionally reaching out, as it were, endeavoring to raise his or her vibrations in order to make a contact with those who are trying to make the contact from our side, that will correspond in terms of awareness with the brown study, except that it will be a shuttling to and fro,
Yes.
because the clairvoyant medium must necessarily be in full possession of her consciousness in order that she may relay the message. But there will be a rapid shuttling to and fro, so that the medium, until thoroughly happy and settled, will hardly be aware where he is upon your side of life or upon our side of life. That you will be able to confirm if you shall speak to a successful clairvoyant, a practiced clairvoyant medium. And I do not think I can go much more deeply into your question, my sister.
Well, I thank you so much. It's puzzled me a little because he and I were talking about it, and he said that he'd rather like it cleared up.
Well, that is the position. There is no difference at all insofar as the spirit, the subconscious mind is concerned, between deep trance and deep sleep. In deep trance, of course, the body may be made use of by another individual, such as myself. In deep sleep, that is not the case, because when the medium, the instrument, has composed himself for sleep, he has no desire and no intention at all that his body shall be made use of. It is to be allowed to repose and to recuperate, as is the spirit of him, and therefore there is no desire that his body shall be used. And therefore, if any attempt were made to use the body in the condition of sleep, the sleeper would be recalled quite hurriedly and naturally by virtue of the link with this etheric cord, you see. But the condition of the spirit is the same. It is only the intention, the purpose, what shall happen to the physical body, which differs. Anesthesia is a little different. Anesthesia, like hypnotism, is something of a bludgeoning. You see, anesthesia is caused by the condition of the physical body being rendered such that the spirit can no longer inform and inhabit and instruct it. And therefore it is a little different from the witting and intentional departure which occurs both in sleep and in trance. I have spoken upon this point, and your good doctor has also spoken upon the point of inducing sleep by means of powerful drugs. That is anesthesia of a kind, you see. It is a bludgeoning. The body is rendered incapable of sustaining the informing of the spirit. Therefore, the spirit is, as it were, thrust out from its habitation without necessarily wishing so to be. Consequently, there is a degree of shock. Consequently, there cannot be the same reposeful sleep as is the case when the whole organism, psychic, spiritual, and physical, are in harmony upon the point. And that applies also to hypnotism. There is, again, a degree of bludgeoning, since the spirit is here not, of course, because of an attack upon the body, but of course because of an attack upon the mind. The spirit is cast out, as it were, from the body for the time being, and the body, through the suggestiveness, the suggestibility of the subconscious mind, will respond to the instructions of the hypnotist, who for the time being is the trance control. Do you see?
Yes, I do. Sorry.
My child?
We have understood from the nominal devil that in deep trance and in deep sleep, the spirit probably goes to its natural station.
I think the probability is that the spirit will go to its natural station, my child, but what is the natural station for that particular spirit? It is not possible to determine.
Oh, no, no.
You will see that point.
Yes,
I dare not say
no.
that the spirit of this particular instrument at this particular moment is on any plane whatever, for I do not know.
Oh, no.
I cannot know. And regrettably, from his point of view and yours, the probability is that he too will not know when he shall return among you, where he has been or in what circumstances. But, since you speak of the natural station, the one natural thing, of course, is the link of love. And if there shall be one or more, upon the spirit planes who has a close attachment with this person, whom I now use, then it is virtually certain that they will meet in circumstances such as this, even as they will meet in sleep. But upon what plane I cannot say, for that will depend upon the mental state as well as the spiritual advancement of the individual at the time. And it will fluctuate, as you will be aware. Your own spiritual condition fluctuates, and it is reflected in your psychic state. At times you are treading on air, is it not? And at other times you are cast down and feel very heavy indeed. They are reflections, you know, of the psychic state of your spirit for one reason or another. And consequently, you will not visit any particular plane or surface, as it were, when you sleep or when you shall go into trance or any other form of anaesthesia. But if there is a link of love, then the meeting will take place because the link will be a mutual one. The call will be a mutual one. And whatever plane the sleeper or the trance medium shall travel to, and that, as I say, will depend upon his mental and spiritual condition at the time, then to that plane will come the loved one, if that loved one can achieve to lower or raise the vibrations accordingly. And most usually it is done.
Isn't that sort of remembering dreams and in a parallel way remembering what has happened during deep trance, just accidental, varying with the personal instrument?
Very largely so, my child, but it is a faculty which I believe can be developed. You will excuse me for not being too positive upon this point, but you will recall that it is a long time since I myself dwelt in the physical body, and consequently I must speak by report and repute, and at second hand rather than at first hand. But I believe that the faculty can be developed. There are exercises of the mind which will, as I gather, enable the sleeper in greater and greater degree to recall that which has transpired during his sleep. And upon occasion, it will develop to such a remarkable and surprising degree that the sleeper may become consciously aware of what he is doing and where he has been during his sleep. You then call it astral traveling. There is no difference in the state. There is no difference at all in the state. The difference is in the degree of awareness.
Yes.
And that is my point in answer to my sister. And this brings us back to the original question, that the difference in all these states of sleep, partial sleep, light sleep and heavy sleep, trance, light trance, anaesthesia, hypnotism, the difference as far as the spirit of the person is concerned lies in the degree of awareness of your universe or of our universe. And that is all.
Is the spirit always withdrawn to the etheric body in these times ever?
At times of unconsciousness,
Yes.
Unconsciousness of the physical body, that is.
Yes.
Why, yes, for that is unconsciousness.
Yes.
Whilst the spirit continues through the subconscious mind to inform the body, then the person is conscious or partly conscious. And again, the person may be partly conscious of your world and partly conscious of ours, as I have already said. But all the while, the spirit is informing the physical body, there is consciousness to a degree, and when the spirit ceases to inform the physical body, there is unconsciousness. And the spirit does not withdraw into the etheric, for it is already there.
There.
But it becomes aware of the etheric instead of the physical. Do you see?
Yes. Yes, I do see. One
It is a
uses
matter
wrong
of vibration.
terms.
The terms are perhaps convenient to you, but they're apt to mislead.
Yes.
For immediately, if I shall permit it to be said that the spirit of the medium is withdrawn, someone will leap upon me and say, whither is it drawn?
Yes.
Where does it go? And that is a question that cannot be answered, for it does not go anywhere. It changes its orientation. The outlook is different. The awareness is different, because it is upon a different range or series of vibrations. And that is all. For there is but one universe. There is but one God, and He is all that there is. So we cannot say that this is earth and God is elsewhere. Neither can we say God is upon earth and He is not elsewhere. For God is all, Spirit is all. But in my Father's house are many mansions. The ramifications and degrees of frequencies are infinite, as of course they must be when infinity is in question. And therefore the attention, the awareness, has an infinity of possibilities. You see?
Yes, one has to use the wrong terms. One realizes quite well when you point it out exactly where one slips up.
You will use the terms for convenience, my sister, but if precise definition shall be required, then it is necessary, of course, to make it quite clear that the Spirit has not gone anywhere at all. It is neither behind this instrument, nor above it, nor below it, nor is it within it. At any time. It is. That is all. And it is impossible to say where it is in relation to your physical universe. For when it is no longer making the contact with your physical universe, then it is nowhere in relation to your physical universe. But it still is. In exactly the same
The
way.
operative word the whole time is awareness.
That is so, my sister. Awareness all the time. That is why I have had occasion not to deride and certainly not to chide, but to comment upon the contemplative practices of certain Eastern cults, sects, religions, if you will, where the intention and the object is to reduce the man, usually a man, reduce him to an object which shall know nothing, to attain a kind of nirvana.
Yes.
Very well, by all means, but to what end, to what purpose? By all means, annihilate yourself thus, if you wish so to do. It is a denial of awareness, whereas the universe, the greater universe, which is God, which is all Spirit, has so much of which it is pleasant and joyful to be aware. It is not always the case upon the earth plane, I am aware of that. But there is so much that is pleasant and lovely, of which you can be aware. And it seems, to say the least of it, a little sad that an experience upon the earth plane should lead man to wish to deny his own awareness and to annihilate it. Probably because his experiences in earth life have not been very happy ones. That is usually the case. But it will not always be upon the earth plane, my children. It is, as far as your awareness is concerned, it is the first step, and it is a short one by comparison with those succeeding. A very, very short one indeed, for it is but an anteroom, an introduction, and you would not expect the introduction to the main work to be as powerful, or as long, or as pleasing as the work itself. It is leading up to something much greater and finer and bigger than itself. But if you shall deny your own awareness, then it is a pity, for you will not appreciate what is to follow to the same degree.
think that's very illuminating. And just strive for more and more awareness even here.
With caution, my sister, I would like very much to approve most heartily that dictum of yours. Yes, indeed, strive for awareness. But awareness will bring with it a sensitivity. And as I have said, I know all too well that conditions, circumstances upon the earth plane are not always pleasant and happy ones. And if you shall make yourself very much aware, you shall suffer as well as enjoy. If you can do this, you will be a saintly person. But you may suffer. After you have quit the unhappy earth plane and had entered into the region which is rightly yours, then by all means let loose your sense of awareness, for there all will delight and pleasure you. But upon the earth plane, I think with a little caution. It is not to say that you are to turn your backs upon a suffering one because it is not pleasant to look upon, but you would not feel that way, for your compassion would be aroused. But there are some things upon the earth of which it is perhaps as well that you should not be too keenly aware. And that is not escapism, to use a modern phrase. It is a little caution, perhaps. Where you can help, then by all means let your awareness function and give the help that you will wish to do. But where you are to be hurt, perhaps, and can do no good, can be of no help at all, there is little point in subjecting yourself to impacts of the most painful. It was this that I had in mind when, quite a long time ago, I told my son, and others too, of my children, that they are not to endeavor to carry the burden of the world upon their shoulders. You cannot do it, and therefore your awareness must be tempered with a little caution, where you know it is impossible for you to help or to do anything at all to mitigate circumstances which could but bring pain to you. It is not escapism, my sister. You have yourselves to consider as well as your neighbor. That is not to be forgotten. You are as important as your neighbor, if not more so, at least as important. And so you must consider yourselves a little. After you shall have left the earth plane, when you shall come to dwell among us, you will then realize what awareness truly means. For how can you be aware now, when your awareness is trammeled and limited by the channels of physical senses which you must make use of, and without which you can be aware of nothing upon your earth? But that is not awareness. It is a dull glimmer, my sister, in comparison with the blinding light into which you shall enter. And you will be a little nervous at first of letting your awareness function to its full, for it will seem to be beyond your sustaining. But it is your natural station, and you will enter into it, into the fulfillment of your heritage and your birthright, and you shall learn what it is to be aware and to love and to be loved, as those who have made that little journey are already aware or are being made aware. And they will be there to welcome and to help you insofar as you will need it. You need have no fear then of being hurt or pained. mind if Andrews has the word?
Not at all.
I wanted just to say a small thank you to you people who attend this particular meeting very regularly and maintain the rhythm which is so essential for us, without which the whole thing can be thrown into a chaotic state and require a great deal more labour to get it back into working order again. And you people very, very kindly come and sit and take part in the demonstrations with very little that is exciting, perhaps, for you to get hold of. You know, of course, by now that the composition of this particular circle on both sides of life is such that it's extremely unlikely that we should be able to produce any physical phenomena. And nonetheless, you come along and listen to what our teachers have to say. I say our because, of course, we listen to the teaching just as you do. You've shown exemplary patience. I know you will reply that you feel privileged to listen to these teachings, as indeed do we. But at the same time, I do appreciate the earthly desire for what Abu has called signs and wonders, something a little striking perhaps, and we are unable to provide that in the present conditions. And so I thought a word of thanks from me, as being one of the operators who attend to the mechanism of this business, would not be out of place. We shall naturally take up the work again on the return of the instrument from this holiday, and I particularly will be very grateful if you can maintain the rhythm even in his absence.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because we shall still be working, even though there may be no results or very, very little results manifest among you. Nonetheless, we shall still be working. I don't mean that we shall be working frenziedly to make something visible to you or even audible, but to maintain the rhythm and to keep this peculiar power in operation.
Do you mean to say that there is some kind of work actually going on us sitters?
On the sitters?
Yes.
Why, yes, of course. Of course. There's work going on, not really on the sitters, but through the sitters. You see, the members of a circle who regard themselves as passive sitters are in fact supplying quite a large proportion of the power which must be used. And in that sense, work is being done upon you, although I would prefer to say through you. But it's chiefly a question of blending, you see. You, each and every one of you bring in your own aura, your own atmosphere, as it were, and each aura has its specific rate of vibration, specific frequency, and in order to get respectable results and to maintain the sitting over a reasonable period without the power fading away, these various auric emanations must be blended harmoniously. They need not necessarily be identical. They are not identical, and it wouldn't be possible to make them so, but they must be blended harmoniously so that there's no discord, to continue the musical analogy.
That's what you do, eh?
That is part of my work, yes, indeed, to collate and correlate these various emanations which are brought into us, and to blend them, as I say, and then to make use of them in order to make possible this takeover of the physical organism of the medium by one or other of the communicators, whoever may be going to speak. You had a case which is in point on, I think, our most recent occasion, when a gentleman endeavoured to speak to you and was unable to make himself understood. Now, the vibration rate of that particular communicator was a rather low one compared with the vibration rate of those of which we're more accustomed. And consequently, we were not able to make conditions in which he could make himself understood whilst speaking.
That'll be one reason why this circle is not successful in communications from personal communication, I mean.
It's entirely a question of the vibration rate. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult indeed. But this gentleman was able to take a control. There was some degree of, I don't know about urgency, I suppose it was something to do with the particular time or day or something of that kind, but there was a degree of urgency that he should be permitted to control as he did, and he was most anxious to do so in order to get a message across. But the poor fellow was unable to make himself understood. It was no fault of his, you know. There was nothing that we could do about it because we could not blend the vibrations harmoniously.
The adjustment was too big.
The adjustment was, in effect, too fine, not too big.
Too fine.
Too fine. No, it isn't a question of the width of range, but a question of the fineness of the adjustment.
And still it strikes me that if you, for instance, have only 3 sitters who are really fully in harmony, that you can do much, much more with these 3 sitters only than with a crowd of people who all supply power, but it's a big job to adjust the vibrations to something so that it is not really just the power supplied by a crowd, by a great number of people.
Indeed, no. I think in point of fact you've had that touched upon before. As you rightly say, if you have 3 sitters who are in harmony, in our sense, then very well, there's very little harmonizing to be done. Mm-hmm. It's already there. If, on the other hand, you have a larger number of sitters, such as you have here tonight, then there is more work for us to do because of the differing rates which must all be brought into harmony. Precisely.
Having harmonized them, is there more power?
I wouldn't say there's more power, because there's what I may call a threshold limit. The only sense in which there is more power is that it's highly probable that a sitting with a number of sitters could be maintained for a longer time, as far as you're concerned. More in that sense, but not more power in the sense of being more able. There's a threshold limit below which we cannot offer or promise satisfactory communication. And this gentleman to whom I've made reference is a case in point. We were able to make it possible for him to speak, but we weren't able to make it possible for him to make himself understood. And that's the fineness of tuning.
Something we'll have to do will also, I'm going to say, the capacity of the instrument which you're using has something to do with it as well.
Well, yes, of course, the instrument is in the picture, but you see, in this instance, of course, I'm taking that for granted. He is, as it were, more or less a stable quantity, although naturally his mental condition and his emotional condition will vary the vibration rate, and that also we have to take care of. Well, thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Well, we will try to keep the rhythm going whilst your instrument is on holiday.
I'd be greatly obliged. It will be helpful to us because it will save a repetition work when you wish to recommence.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of the medium must be carried out by the medium himself.
I see.
In the trance condition or in the normal condition, it matters not which. But in the case which you have cited, the probability is this. I do not speak, of course, with knowledge, but the probability in the circumstances is this. You offer me an instrument relatively undeveloped in a mental sense,
And therefore with a subconscious mind which is not well filled, as I find this subconscious mind to be reasonably well filled, but which on the other hand, on the contrary, is somewhat blank, shall we say. And there probably is, a forceful spirit personality, a forceful communicator, who is able and willing to make a much more close link and contact with the mentality and the physical body of the medium of whom you speak than I find it necessary or desirable to do in this case. There will be, in such circumstances, almost an exchange of personality. The very subconscious mind itself will be inhibited and set aside, and the subconscious mind which shall instruct the body to speak or to write, or whatever the phenomenon may be, the subconscious mind which is doing the instructing will be that of the communicator and not that of the medium. It is a closer, more intimate linkage than I have permitted, or I think that I could achieve with this medium. And in this case it has not proved to be necessary. Do you follow that?
Yes, I follow that. Well, I rather think you're right there. As one of the communicators, he hasn't been on that side of life, of course. He's been over quite a time, but nothing like the period you've been over there. And whilst on the earth here, he was a very noted astronomer, and the others are people of similar calibre. Some of them possibly been over there 200 or 300 years, but I don't think they go back in the thousands of years like you do, and possibly they do, as you say, find it easier to assume complete control of the medium.
With such an instrument, I would imagine that to be the case myself.
The instrument himself, he has no interest at all in the stuff that comes through him. He can't even be bothered to read it, and they really have some marvellous discourses come through him.
Which goes further, my son, to bear out my suggestion. Do you see?
Yes.
For if the subconscious mind of the medium had been trained in spirit in order that these things could be produced through his instrumentality, then he would, almost necessarily, he would retain a degree of interest and concern about the thing when in the normal state.
Yes, I see.
But if the whole of the mind of the medium is set aside, and the brain alone and the physical body alone are made use of by a forceful personality who is prepared and able to make as close a link as is necessary, so that, as I have said, you have virtually for the time being an exchange of personality, then the medium himself does not come into question. And he need not have any interest at all in the matter.
Yes, I see that now.
He is not really concerned.
I'm it clears one of the snags I was up against in our earlier talks on this subject. I did ask you, if you remember at the time, that if the present medium's etheric body was dispensed with, how is it that you retained any of his subconscious mind? And I remember you did answer that question for me, and I see that it is possible, apparently, to not only turn out the etheric body, but the subconscious mind as well, and
Yes,
completely use the brain only.
Without intentional unkindness, I will draw a little parallel. Our dear friend, our very dear and much loved friend Alfred, makes of necessity much closer contact with this physical body than I myself have to do.
Yeah.
And the content of the subconscious mind of this medium is not available to Alfred as it is available to me.
No.
He could not, our friend Alfred could not discourse to you and make use of the vocabulary and the grammatical terms and all such things which I find ready to my hand and I am able to manipulate them. But Alfred could not do so.
Yes,
His contact is closer with the physical body, but he is limited by his own limitations.
Yes, I see.
Whereas in the case which you cite to me, the reverse is the case. The medium's minds are, as it were, dispossessed for the time being, and a personality of much greater knowledge and erudition and ability takes the place of those lesser minds and operates the body. So you have the same position, but the other way around.
Yes, I see, Uncle.
Do you see?
Most interesting.
My own case is a sort of halfway house. I do not find it necessary to occupy the body. I would have great difficulty in so doing. I have, shall I say, left the earth plane for a sufficient length of time and distance of space that it would be extremely difficult for me to occupy it as Alfred does. My control is a remote one by comparison with his. But the probability is that if I were so to occupy the body, I would not find myself as free to express my ideas as I find myself now.
Yes, possibly not.
Because his subconscious mind, this subconscious mind, would probably get in my way, since it is an active one.
Yeah.
The medium of whom you speak has a somewhat dormant mind, it would appear,
Yes.
and the more powerful one of his communicator can quite easily set it aside and override it.
Thank you very much, Emma. That clears that point up for me anyway.
It would seem then that there are so many different ways in which
The mediumship,
you
control.
how it can be controlled.
Yeah.
Apart from mediumship.
Far from cut and dry.
Yeah,
It is not cut and dried, my sister, and your spiritualism is probing through the veil on both sides. You are probing and we are probing. Has been going on for so short a time. You will tell me it is more than 100 years. I say again, so short a time. That it is not feasible that either you or we should yet have been able to learn a great deal about a subject so fundamental, bristling with so many difficulties, because very personal, and because it is a matter of mind and of spirit, and not of physical matter. For physical matter, unless disturbed, is inert. But that is not the case with mind or with spirit. And therefore those, not I myself, all I am doing is giving vent to my ideas. And these good friends who do what is necessary are, by the use of this subconscious mind and this body, converting my ideas into speech which shall be intelligible, or reasonably so, to you. But it is not like handling your physical matter. The subconscious mind of this medium will not remain passive and inert. My ideas, my will, must be imposed upon it. That is occurring here and now. And if my attention should be diverted for one reason or another, this subconscious mind would itself take control at once. Do you see?
Yes.
But of course it is complex, and of course the methods, the manners of impacting upon the earth plane are multifarious. And they range, of course, from the mere hunch it came into my mind, all the way to a complete trance control. All the way.
That's most interesting.
Many ways to make contact from the other side through mediums like Rick.
Oh yes, because you've got several ways through the one medium.
There's one medium.
Yes, my son, yes, my sister. As I have said, it is a personal matter, a very, very largely a personal matter. Not only personal to the instrument, but personal to the communicator as well. And you will see, I have a little aptitude with mathematics, but those of you who have mathematically inclined minds will see that if there are perhaps 3 or 4 or half a dozen possible methods of making contact, and there are a number of personalities all associated with the one medium, then the mathematical possibilities of, what is your word? I cannot find it. Juggling with these combinations becomes very large indeed. And so there are many, many methods many ways of making use of the one instrument, which will depend upon the individual who is wishing to communicate. Sometimes, which in my view is the best, my own method, possibly because it is mine, I think it's the best. It is a remote control.
I should say that it's the best in respect that it is less liable to be interfered with by the medium's mind.
That is so, my son, and also I myself, my own mind is less inhibited, less confined by the earthly circumstances. Yeah. If I can remain as I do remain, fairly remote from the scene of action as it were, then I can continue to think clearly and can but trust that down this telephone line my message, my words, will come and will emerge clearly to you. Whereas if I had to make a closer contact, my hands would be yet more tightly tied even than they are now, and I could not speak, I think, as fully and as clearly as I now find myself able to do.
Yeah. Yes, I think we quite grasp that. I mean, we put it in our own way that the further you get down in the ocean, the more intense the pressure becomes, the more difficult it is to move or speak. And I presume that you can liken that in the question of lowering vibrations.
Just so, my son, just so. And that is why, as I have said in the past, on more than one occasion, the ideal method of communication is by what you know as inspiration.
Yes.
If I, from my fourth heaven, or some other from a remoteness, shall be able to use a telepathic faculty and to inspire thought in the mind of one dwelling upon earth, then the probability is that that message will be of the purest order.
Yes.
And to be further, one must come down, as you rightly say, into the